The Empress's suitor stumbled backward, his elaborate ceremonial robes tangling around his legs as he crashed into the obsidian floor. The crack of his skull against stone echoed through the throne room, and not a single one of the 300 assembled nobles moved to help him. "Remove him," Empress Selveth'ra commanded, her voice carrying no more emotion than if she had ordered a servant to clear a dinner plate. Marcus Cole remained where he was, third row from the back, pressed between two Valorian diplomats who pretended he didn't exist. He was supposed to be invisible here. A cultural attaché. A glorified note-taker from a species the Valorian Empire considered barely worth acknowledging. This was the 9th suitor the Empress had rejected in 3 months. The 9th noble house she had humiliated. The whispers said she was cursed. The whispers said she was barren, broken, too damaged by the war that had killed her parents and left her ruling at 17. The whispers said many things, and Marcus had learned to catalog them all in his reports back to Earth's diplomatic corps. What the whispers never mentioned was the way her hands trembled slightly after each rejection. The way her silver eyes went distant, seeing something far beyond the groveling nobleman being dragged from her presence. The ceremony continued. The matriarch of House Volkith stepped forward, her daughter in tow. A young woman with scales the color of deep ocean water and terror, written across every line of her body. "Great Empress," the matriarch began, "my daughter Thessaly would be honored." "Your daughter looks at me like I'm going to eat her," Selveth'ra interrupted. "I may be many things, matriarch, but I'm not so desperate as to bind myself to someone who trembles at my presence." The matriarch's face hardened. Perhaps if the Empress were less severe in her judgments, perhaps if your houses sent me partners rather than political pawns, I would have less cause for severity. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus found himself holding his breath. This was dangerous territory, an Empress openly criticizing the noble houses, suggesting they valued alliance over her well-being. True as it was, speaking it aloud was a violation of every unwritten rule of Valorian court politics. The matriarch's scales flushed dark purple, rage, barely contained. The Empress forgets that even she requires the support of the houses. The Empress forgets nothing. Selveth'ra rose from her throne, and Marcus was struck again by how young she looked. 23 in human years, barely an adult by Valorian standards. "This ceremony is concluded. I will take no consort from today's offerings." She descended the steps of her dais, moving through the crowd with the precise, controlled grace of someone who knew that showing weakness meant death. The nobles parted before her like water before a blade. And then she stopped, directly in front of Marcus. Her silver eyes, 4 of them, arranged in pairs that somehow managed to convey more expression than any human face, fixed on him with an intensity that made his diplomatic training evaporate. "You," she said. "Human. Do?" Marcus bowed. "Your Imperial Majesty, you've attended every rejection ceremony for 3 months." The question was a trap. He knew it was a trap. Every possible answer was wrong. Claiming diplomatic duty would insult her by suggesting he saw her as a spectacle. Claiming personal interest would be presumptuous beyond measure. So he told the truth. "Because I'm trying to understand." Her head tilted. A gesture that looked almost human. Almost curious. Understand what? Why someone with the power to command fleets and reshape worlds looks so tired. The nobles around him inhaled sharply. Several stepped away, as if his words carried a physical contamination. He had just committed a grave breach of protocol, acknowledging an Empress's emotional state, implying vulnerability, speaking to her as if she were a person rather than a symbol. Selveth'ra studied him for a long moment. Her 4 eyes moved independently, taking in details he couldn't imagine. His heartbeat, probably. The dilation of his pupils, the subtle tension in his shoulders. "Your eyes don't match your words," she said. "You spoke boldness, but your eyes hold something else, something softer." Marcus didn't know how to respond to that. He wasn't sure there was a response. "What is your name, human?" "Marcus Cole, Your Majesty. Cultural attaché to Terran diplomatic delegation." "Cultural attaché." She seemed to taste the words, finding them inadequate. "You study us." "I try to understand you." "There's a difference." "Is there?" Her voice carried a weight that suggested the question wasn't rhetorical. "Come to my private audience chamber tomorrow at the 3rd bell. We will discuss this difference you claim to perceive." She moved past him before he could respond, her entourage of silent guards falling into formation around her. The nobles parted again, and then she was gone, and Marcus was left standing in a room full of beings who looked at him like he had just signed his own death warrant. One of the Valorian diplomats he'd been standing with leaned close. "The last human who received a private audience with the Empress was returned to your delegation in 7 separate containers." Marcus swallowed hard. What had he done? He bored her. The private audience chamber was smaller than Marcus had expected. Intimate, even. The walls were lined with books, actual paper books, a luxury beyond measure in a civilization that had long since digitized everything. A fire burned in a crystalline hearth that somehow produced heat without smoke or ash. Selveth'ra sat in a simple chair by the fire, stripped of her ceremonial armor and crown. She wore a flowing robe of deep violet, and without the trappings of office she looked smaller, more real. You came, she said. I wasn't certain you would. Marcus stood just inside the doorway, unsure whether he was permitted to sit. Your Majesty's invitation did not seem optional. Everything is optional, Marcus Cole. She gestured to a chair across from her. Sit. I did not summon you here to watch you stand awkwardly. He sat. The chair was surprisingly comfortable, designed for human proportions, he realized. She had prepared for him. You told me you try to understand us, she said. What have you learned? That the Valorian Empire is more fragile than it appears. That the noble houses play games of power that would be familiar to any human student of history. That your people are proud, honorable, and deeply afraid of appearing weak. He paused. That you are very alone. Her 4 eyes narrowed. You presume much. You asked what I had learned. I could have given you diplomatic pleasantries, but you've heard enough of those to last several lifetimes. I assumed you wanted honesty. And if I punish you for that honesty, then at least one of us will have been genuine. A sound escaped her. Not quite a laugh, but something close to it. Something that suggested she had forgotten how to laugh properly, but remembered the shape of it. My advisors warned me about humans, she said. They said your species was dangerously unpredictable, emotional, that you make decisions based on feeling rather than logic. Your advisors aren't wrong. They also said you were primitive, barely sapient, unworthy of serious consideration. Her eyes fixed on him. In that, I begin to suspect they were very wrong indeed. She rose and moved to a cabinet, returning with a bottle of something amber and 2 glasses. She poured without asking if he wanted any, pressing a glass into his hand. I was 17 when I became Empress, she said, settling back into her chair. The Archeth supremacy killed my parents, my siblings, my cousins, every member of the royal bloodline except me. Do you know why I survived? I don't. Because I was considered insignificant. The 7th child. Female. Deemed unsuitable for rule by traditionalists who believed males carried stronger political bloodlines. A bitter smile crossed her features. Marcus had learned to read Valorian expressions over the past months, the subtle movements of their scaled faces. They didn't bother targeting me. I was not worth the ammunition. Marcus felt the weight of that admission. The casual cruelty of being overlooked so completely that even your enemies didn't consider you a threat. And now you rule the largest empire in this sector of the galaxy. Now I rule. She drank deeply. And every noble house that considered me insignificant now sends me their sons and daughters, hoping to bind their bloodline to mine. As if I could forget that they would have let me die without a second thought. Is that why you reject them? Revenge. I reject them because they look at me and see power. Position. Advantage. Her voice hardened. Not once in 6 years, has anyone looked at me and seen a person. Marcus held her gaze. I see a person. You see what you want to see, maybe. He set his glass down, leaning forward slightly. But here's what I actually see. A woman who collects paper books in an age of digital libraries, which suggests sentiment and perhaps nostalgia. A leader who attends every session of her own rejection ceremonies when she could easily delegate, which suggests either masochism or a genuine desire to give each suitor fair consideration. Someone who prepared a human proportioned chair for this meeting, which suggests attention to detail and perhaps a desire to put me at ease. He paused, watching her face. Her scales had flushed slightly. Surprise, he thought, or possibly something else. I see someone who doesn't know how to ask for kindness because she's never received it without strings attached. Someone who tests people by being harsh because she's learned that gentleness gets exploited. Someone who is profoundly tired of being treated as a symbol when she would give almost anything to be treated as real. The silence stretched between them. Selveth'ra's 4 eyes studied him with an intensity that felt almost physical. My advisors say I should have you executed for impertinence, she finally said. Your advisors say a lot of things. They do. She finished her drink and set the glass aside. Come back tomorrow. Same time. It wasn't a request. The weeks that followed blurred together in Marcus's memory, each day bringing him back to that small chamber, to those conversations that grew longer and more honest with each meeting. She told him about her childhood, The loneliness of being the overlooked seventh child, invisible even to her own parents. He told her about losing his wife to the colony plague on Kepler 4042b. About the hollow year that followed when he had volunteered for the most dangerous posting simply because he didn't care if he came back. She showed him the observatory tower where she went to escape when the weight of empire became too heavy. He taught her to play chess, laughing when she complained that the rules were absurdly arbitrary, but then spent hours developing strategies that defeated him consistently by the second week. They didn't touch. Not once in those first weeks. But the distance between their chairs grew smaller. Their silences grew more comfortable. And Marcus found himself thinking about her in the moments between meetings. The way her scales caught the firelight, the rare music of her actual laughter, the vulnerability she showed him that she showed no one else. It was during the fourth week that the Archith crisis exploded. The Supremacy, apparently not content with having murdered her family, was massing forces on the border. The noble houses demanded a show of strength. The military advisors demanded preemptive strikes. And half the court whispered that a marriage alliance with one of the major houses was the only way to secure enough political capital to survive the coming war. Marcus found her in the observatory, staring out at the stars with an expression that had gone completely blank. "They want me to marry Lord Vestris of House Kethrin," she said without turning. "He has the largest private fleet in the Empire. His support would guarantee victory against the Archeth. And you're considering it. I'm considering what a refusal would cost. How many of my people would die because I was too proud to do my duty?" He moved to stand beside her. Close enough to touch, though he didn't. "What do you want? What I want is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant to me." She turned then, and he saw the tears she had been hiding. A Valorian peculiarity, the way their grief manifested as a subtle phosphorescence around their eyes. Rather than liquid. She was glowing faintly, painfully. "I want one person in this galaxy who sees me as something other than a tool," she whispered. "I want to matter to someone not because of what I can give them, but because of who I am. I want—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Marcus reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and took her hand. Her scales were cool against his skin, smoother than he had expected. She went completely still, staring at their intertwined fingers as if she had never seen anything like it before. "Selveth'ra," he said quietly. It was the first time he had used her name. "You should not be doing this." Her voice was barely audible. "You are human. I am Empress. This is impossible. Most things worth doing are impossible until someone does them. The noble houses would never accept. I don't care about the noble houses. The diplomatic consequences. I don't care about consequences." She looked up at him, her 4 eyes searching his face with desperate intensity. "Why?" "Because you asked me once why I attended your rejection ceremonies. I gave you a clever answer about trying to understand. But the truth?" He squeezed her hand gently. "The truth is that I saw you reject suitor after suitor, and each time I thought, she deserves better. She deserves someone who looks at her and sees the woman hiding behind the crown. I didn't know then that I would become someone who wanted to be that person. But I am now." The kiss was her doing, sudden, fierce tasting of salt and starlight, and something uniquely Valorian that Marcus had no reference for. Her hands gripped his shoulders like she was afraid he would disappear, and when she finally pulled back, she was trembling. "If I choose you," she said, "everything will become more complicated. When has your life ever been simple?" A choked laugh escaped her. "Never. Not once." "Then, let me share the complications." He pressed his forehead to hers, a gesture she had taught him was intimate among her people. "Let me stand beside you. Not as a tool. Not as an alliance. Just as someone who sees you and chooses to stay." The announcement sent shockwaves through the Empire. Empress Selveth'ra, ruler of the Valorian Dominion, had chosen a human as her consort. Not a lord. Not even a noble. A cultural attaché. A note-taker, from a species most Valorians considered barely worth diplomatic acknowledgement. House Kethrin was furious. House Volkith demanded explanations. 3 different assassination attempts were thwarted in the first week alone, and the Archith Supremacy released a mocking statement suggesting that the Empire had finally lost its collective sanity. Marcus stood before the assembled noble houses, wearing ceremonial robes that had been hurriedly tailored for human proportions, and felt the weight of 300 hostile stares pressing down on him. Selveth'ra sat on her throne, regal and untouchable in her formal armor. But he caught the slight movement of her hand, a gesture only he could see, a subtle sign they had developed in their weeks together. It meant, "I am with you." "You question the Empress's choice," he said, and his voice carried clearly through the vast chamber. "You wonder what a human could possibly offer that your noble houses cannot. Let me explain. He stepped forward and several guards tensed. He ignored them. Your houses offered her armies. I offered her conversation. Your houses offered her political alliances. I offered her silence when she needed to grieve. Your houses offered her the strength of your fleets. I offered her chess games at midnight when she couldn't sleep. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He pressed on. You look at me and see weakness, a primitive species. No military power, no political leverage. And you're not wrong. By every metric, your civilization uses to measure worth. I am nothing. He turned, looking up at Selveth'ra, and let everything he felt show in his eyes. But your Empress, my Empress, taught me something in these months together. She taught me that the greatest strength is not found in fleets or armies or political maneuvering. It is found in seeing someone truly, in offering them kindness without expectation, in choosing them not for what they can give you, but for who they are. He faced the nobles again. You want to know what I offer the Empire? I offer your Empress someone who will stand beside her not because it benefits me, but because I believe she deserves to be happy. I offer her a partner who sees her exhaustion and does not exploit it. I offer her... You offer her love. The matriarch of House Volketh interrupted, her voice dripping with contempt. A human emotion. Unreliable. Irrational. Yes, Marcus agreed. Unreliable. Irrational. And more powerful than every fleet in this galaxy. Because it cannot be bought, cannot be threatened, cannot be negotiated away. Selveth'ra rose from her throne. The chamber fell silent. She descended the steps slowly, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. When she reached him, she took his hand, publicly, deliberately, in full view of every noble house in the Empire. You doubt his worth, she said, her voice carrying that same steel it always did in public. But I remember something Lord Vestra said to me when he proposed his alliance. He said, Your Majesty, I offer you my fleet, my house, my loyalty, all in service of the Empire's glory. She turned to look at the assembled nobles. Do you know what this human said to me in his first private audience? He said, You look tired. Not a proposal, not an offer. A simple observation of my humanity, my personhood, that not one of you has made in 6 years of courtship. Her hand tightened on Marcus's. He looked at me, the Empress, the symbol, the prize you all seek to claim. And he saw a woman. Exhausted, lonely, forgotten behind her own crown. Her voice cracked slightly, and Marcus felt his heart break and mend simultaneously. He saw me, not what I could give him, me. She raised their joined hands. This is my choice. This is my consort. And if you cannot accept that your Empress has chosen to be seen rather than used, then perhaps you never understood what you were offering me in the first place. The silence that followed was not hostile. It was something else, confused perhaps or reconsidering. The matriarch of House Volketh stepped forward, her scales shifting through colors Marcus couldn't interpret. For a long moment, she simply studied them. The Empress and the human, hands intertwined. Then she bowed. Perhaps, she said slowly, we have much to learn about what constitutes true alliance. One by one, the other houses followed. Not all of them. Marcus could see the holdouts, the ones whose expressions promised future complications. But enough. More than enough. Later, in the quiet of her chambers, Selveth'ra leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder in a gesture that would have been unthinkable weeks ago. Do you remember the first thing I ever said to you? She asked. Your eyes don't match your words. Marcus quoted. You said I spoke boldness, but my eyes held something softer. I was right. She looked up at him, her 4 eyes carrying a warmth that transformed her entire face. You spoke like a diplomat, but your eyes looked at me like I mattered. You did matter. You do. I know. She pulled him closer, and her voice dropped to something barely above a whisper. I know that now. The fire crackled in the crystalline hearth. Outside, the stars wheeled through their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small drama of 2 beings who had found each other against impossible odds. But in that chamber, in that moment, the galaxy felt very small indeed. And for the first time in 6 years, Empress Selveth'ra of the Valorian Dominion did not feel alone.